So what do you got behind you? Like, oh,
Hey, all right. Hello and welcome to the 17th NFT Guild Roundtable. Today we're uh, are blessed to have Nicolas Ayotte today from Fencemaker here to talk about his NFT metadata update, Oracle CIP, and have some fun and lively discussion following this short presentation. Thank you, Nicolas, and the floor is yours, sir.
You're muted.
Yeah.
oh, you muted everybody when you, okay. Hi, okay. I'm not gonna just go into SIP and read it. I think that'd be boring, but I might share my screen though and show certain parts of it where certain like just in metadata stuff that is better to see than have me explain. But basically with eCoin, we had the challenge of trying to do game metadata on chain. We wanted to do as much of it on chain as possible, right? And we were looking at different ways of doing that, and kind of at the same time that we grew this idea that we had CIP68 came out offering also what I think is a long view into what it will become in the future. Not necessarily using CIP68, I don't know yet, but it's definitely the way to go towards decentralization using smart contracts to manage state for your game. But for now, I think there is no mature way to do it yet. And so what we chose is to find a way to use CIP25 in a way that could be updatable on chain in a way that was both secure and much easier, if possible, than minting and burning your NFTs a second time, because that sucks, obviously, for a lot of reasons. Like, people do not like having their NFTs duplicated in some weird wallet and then burnt. And also, if anything goes wrong, then you duplicated somebody's NFT, right? That's super bad. Like, that's not great. And also, a lot of people, when I was looking around, I've been around since the beginning of NFTs and on Cardano, and a lot of people locked their policies out of good, legitimate concerns for security, but then now they're locked and they're trying to make a game. And they're like, oh, but I'd like to make it on chain and be cool and not have that be like super centralized in my database, but now I can't. Like, there's no way to update my NFTs. I'm kind of stuck. So, and we had some legitimate questions like, okay, well, I've got to update like my horses, all my 14,000 horses every day, like to give them daily races. Like, I'm not gonna mint and burn 14,000 horses like in the evening every day. Like, the chain's not gonna like that. Nobody's gonna like me, and it's a horrible practice. So we were trying to look into different ways of doing that, and basically we came up with an oracle. An oracle is just posting data so it's available on chain. So that's the simplest way to explain what an oracle is. So what we wanted to do is have a way to post just a message that would adjust the metadata for NFTs. So have a secure way of defining how this message would be provably secure. So basically, in this case, what we do is we say your oracle defines an address, and that address you should be the only one with a key to, right? And you have to send yourself a message from that address to that address with metadata on it. So that's provably secure, because if you own the keys, then you're the only person that can send those messages. And then what you do is you just say, okay, well, for NFT X of my policy, you will change this field to this value. And so you're not minting, you're not burning, and you can change a single field. You don't have to give the whole metadata every time. So that has a lot of advantages in terms of the size of transactions, obviously, and the number of horses or of NFTs that you could update using that. So in every other way, it follows CIP25, right? It's literally just a little update live on CIP25. Some people have asked about limitations from this. You can update even multiple times per block. Basically, it will look at the slot of the update and it will apply them in chronological order. Though to see the effects will be shown, or you can look at them on chain, of course, once per block, right? The update comes with the block, but there can be multiple updates within the same block, and they'll be applied correctly in the right order. So that's, can I share? I should share my screen here to show what that looks like, because then we thought, but there's like no good reason. If I share my screen, maybe I can't. I can't because I'm in browser. Okay, that's okay. So basically then we had the question like, why couldn't we do something clever where you could update multiple NFTs in a better way? Let's do a batch update. So what we did was, you can say like update every horse of the equine horse policy and set daily race to 5, right? And that's a single message, single line, updates 14,000 horses, and costs nearly nothing. And so that opens up a lot of optimization for a lot of metadata updates that are recurrent in games, and you'll have that all the time, right? Energy or HP or MP, you know, there's a lot of game mechanics that would require, okay, well, it's midnight, it's like the reset of the day's energy, everybody gets their energy back, right? That's basically what we do for equine, which is the race, the daily races energy, and then you get the monthly breeding also, shots and stuff like that you're doing. So having batch
Sorry to
updates.
interrupt, but if you want to share the screen, maybe you can send us the link and we'll share it. So if there's additional data that maybe you
Send a link. Send a link for GitHub. Basically, I don't know how you could just go down to regex metadata updates. It's a little title. Oh, I could have sent a link with it. That's so cool. But anyway, this section. So if you want to show that, but so there's that, and then there's ways to simply do mass updates with everybody having different values, but in efficient manner. So there's 3 ways. There's the post NFT per NFT updates. There's batch updates, and there's another way to just make the update a bit more compact. If you're having to do a lot of the same stuff. Yeah, so regex metadata is the token name regex could hit something that you need. Let's say for us, it's easy to hit all the horses, but let's say Cardano warriors, if I could imagine that, you could easily hit only the demons, or hit only the dragons, or hit only the, using the regex, and say, okay, well, all the dragons get their dragon breath back to tree every evening, or something, and that would be a single message. So that's very efficient. For a lot of game mechanics, I could see that becoming extremely efficient. So that's basically what we were working on, having ways to just post CIP25 metadata updates. And then the other question, of course, is, well, cool, you've got this oracle, but somebody needs to know what's the current state of the game, right? So that's called an indexer, basically that looks at every block that comes into the blockchain, every block as they get minted, and it's a sieve, so it's basically a big filter, and it looks at whatever you asked it to look for. So you could say, look only for the address of my oracle, right? You can disregard everything else from the blockchain, look only at this address, and every time there's something at this address, well, you read the metadata and you process it in some way, right? So you basically, you will update the metadata in a certain database for the current state of my game. And you could do that for multiple games at the same time. So we're building this indexer and the oracle for equine in particular, but we also made it in a way that it would be customizable for any project. We will be giving out as open source. The only thing we won't give out is the private key of equine. We're keeping that, but everything else you can see exactly how we're going to do it for equine. Basically, the whole thing, the whole configuration, how it will literally really work. The only thing you'll be missing is the key. And so you can use that as a basis for your game, and then just build on top of it and update your NFTs, and that'll be good. I think that the main motivation in my mind was a bit of an OG motivation of doing it for equine, also providing this for every game out there that promised a lot of things to their users in 2021 and 2022 and did not have a real good way of delivering. on the aspect of putting metadata updates on chain. So hopefully that can help all of them. And everybody that has a smaller team and cannot really afford to do smart contracts dev, because it's still kind of hard and specialized, and it requires, you know, audits, and there's a lot of complexity and money that needs to go into making smart contracts correctly. So not everybody can program their whole game state like into a big state machine that would provide for their NFTs to evolve correctly using CIP68. So I'm sure there will be future NFT metadata schemas that use Datum and that are similar or are CIP68 maybe. But for now, and also for smaller teams, I think this provides a service that's necessary and that will help a lot of us get our games on chain, like more verifiable, more public, more decentralized. So that's basically the motivation, what we're doing, an Oracle, an indexer, giving the code out and putting out a way to update metadata on chain. If I can point out, let's say an optional bonus, if everybody starts supporting CIP86, let's say pool.pm does, right? Well, you can now mint all your NFTs with no metadata if you want, and then post a single update that sets all the fields that are the same for everybody. So that would be a single NFT update. It would update all your NFTs with, let's say, the name of the collection, like everything that's the same for all of them. And then you just set their name and images in a second update, and you're, let's say, 10 to 100 times more efficient in terms of metadata usage on the blockchain. So that's one of the things you could do with it. If we ever get the chain as crowded as it once was, me and Cash lived through it, where we were trying to mint stuff and the chain was always at 99%. There was no way to mint anything. It was super harsh, and everybody was minting at the same time, and the chain just could not handle it before it got a big boost in processing power and blocks. But if that ever happens again, let's say mass adoption comes before Hydra or stuff like that, and we get another congestion event, then there would be ways around that also using the CIP. There would be clever ways of setting the metadata of all your NFTs using a lot less data. So that's my elevator pitch version. And I'm better at answering questions than doing a full detailed presentation. So that was the gist of it. Anybody have questions? Fahad.
Maybe worth, hi, yeah. I just wanted to add, actually, thanks, Nick, for the great explanation. I wanted to add maybe one use case, which is, I think, very familiar to you, just that you've been maybe a little bit more out of tune while you're focusing on the game aspect, is actually also minting corrections. So there's been collections that have typos or have issues with links and stuff like that. Those also use the similar. Like I've minted collections where a whole species or type or variety of a collection had a bug, and those would also have been addressed with the same minting a duplicate and burning. So this would also again be similarly efficient. Maybe worth mentioning though, I think I have a question, just because I think this part maybe wasn't addressed and people might be maybe curious about, is how we define who is eligible to issue an update. Or actually, before that, maybe I just explain it like M5 version, if you guys don't mind, because there is one statement I got while this call was being explained to me. Disclaimer: I'm not a dev. Is it would be a wallet in Equin's case, or in any project case. It would be a wallet in Equin's case that makes statements about horses. So it's an address that sends transactions or ADA, basically, minimum ADA to itself, or any amount of ADA really, to itself with metadata as content. And that is the message. That is the update. And then the indexer just collects all of those and creates what the current state is. So that's the concept, I would say, in a very simplistic explanation. But Nick, if you can maybe just share like who is allowed to post updates, or what really governs that relationship of a policy ID and who can update it, or how that's identified, just as one aspect.
You're muted again.
I'm muted again. Yeah, basically for policies that are locked, we had to find a way to at least allow them to benefit from this SIP, because it was at least in part designed for them, or at least with them in mind. Even though eCoin, we didn't lock our policy at all because we knew our horses would be reborn. At the time, there was no clever way of making that really possible. So I just left the policy unlocked. For me, that's a design question, a code design question. But a lot of people lock their policies, and now there would be no way for them to like mint something or do something clever for that. So what we did is you have to sign your Oracle message with the same pub key hash as your policy. So the pub key hash that allows to mint your NFTs is the pub key hash address that needs to be in the message. So it needs to be both the source and the destination of your Oracle messages. So you need to have the private key that you minted with. But it doesn't matter if the policy is locked, right? The key is still valid. The key remains valid, by the way. It's just the policy that has a lock in it, but not the key. So you just have to sign with the same pub key hash and you're fine. So that will be picked up as your source of truth, meaning you own the keys of this collection, right? So it's proof enough for me that you're allowed to update it. And then otherwise, what you can do is there's a way to simply, there's a little transaction that's defined in the SIP that you can do, and you can set a main address where your updates will be posted to and from, basically. So you can update that. And the advantage of being able to set it is that if it ever gets compromised for some reason, then you can switch it. Or if you lose your keys, or if you do something. So you've got a cold address from where you can set the address for the messages of the Oracle. You should probably just set it once and leave it be. But if you're either paranoid, or you lose your keys, or it gets compromised, then you can at least switch it from another key that's much safer. Because Oracle messages will be posted by a bot, right? By a program. So it will need to have the key. And so you've got your key probably on your server or in the cloud or somewhere that's inherently less safe. So it could get hacked, could get stolen, could get, you could lose it by some way. So you first define a key that's probably a hardware wallet. And then you assign a key that will be posting your updates. And then if that ever gets in trouble, you can switch it to another key that's not in trouble. Give that key to your bot so that it can keep running your game, and you always keep your hardware wallet key safe. So you cannot get fully compromised if you ever get compromised. And if you ever get compromised, then what you do is you just post an update rolling back whatever the malicious person did, right? The first thing you do when you take your key back, you go like, okay, well, let's just roll back everything that happened. And you can do that, right? You can just post an update rolling back time. You take a snapshot of your database. So that's just a security concern. It was designed with the help of MLabs, which have a lot of experience doing those kind of things for DEXs, where it's even more convoluted and secure than this. There's more levels to it. They emit tokens that are only valid for a certain number of time. And so it's even more convoluted, but having an extra level of security where the master key is on the hardware storage is really the right way to do it in principle. So that's a good practice, and we're trying to support that in the SIP. Offer it, at least. If you want to have 2 soft keys or 2 hot keys, that's kind of your problem, but at least we support a way to do it securely. Oh, and there's a case that was brought up during the discussions about the SIP that was really interesting. I didn't think about it at all. That's why it helps to have peer review and a lot of different eyes looking at it, a lot of different minds, right? And somebody said, but my policy is locked for a good reason, right? I don't like, what if my holders are scared that I start updating my NFTs? Like I said, I wouldn't, like, right? I locked it. Like that was the point, to say like, I'm never gonna touch your NFTs again. And now you're offering a way for them to update it. Well, we offer a way to opt out. You can mint, you can send a message that says, and I'm never gonna use you. So I'm opting out of the SIP. So that you can right away prove to your holders, yeah, this exists, but I opted out, right? Look at this transaction. I said I would never, like I'm locked out. There's no way for me to use it. So you can do that if your holders have legitimate concerns that you could be switching their NFTs on them and they're scared, or you just out of principle, you say like, no, I was locking for a good reason. I never wanted my NFTs to move. I want to prove it. So this SIP does not circumvent that in that way, that you can literally just opt out right from the beginning. Any questions?
In that sense, how will it will be different from an open policy? I mean, for new projects, because obviously older projects that already have a closed policy, if you're making a decision whether or not to opt in or out of.
Yeah, the big difference is you cannot mint again if it's locked. There's no NFTs ever that will be minted or burnt again in this collection. The collection is static. So you can change the metadata, but you cannot change ownership. You cannot add more. You cannot dilute the collection. You cannot suddenly burn the collection, creating inflation. So there's the collection is, the tokens are fixed, right? They're static. The policy is locked. So the only thing you can touch is the metadata. I think that's a very different paradigm in that sense. And it's way more efficient. So if you created a game, it's really built for little tiny efficient updates, or bulk updates, efficient updating.
So I'll jump in.
Yep.
I've been listening a little bit, and you know me, I'm not a dev. I'm just a guy who likes Cardano NFTs. So I guess my thought immediately goes to, is it fixing the main problem of using the layer 1 as the metadata updater, right? Like are we utilizing the L1 for what it's supposed to be, or are we going to still be crowding it? Because I think you made a really good point that, even if you did have an open policy, right, you can change the NFTs forever, you can update the metadata forever, but you're still doing that on the L1 of Cardano. And when we get to a point of mass adoption, I don't even think it will take mass adoption. We had about 30,000 active users last bull run, and we were maxing out the chain every day. So for me, when you add, the possibility of all these new people coming to the chain with the, with the adoption, as well as, the game starting to come out, all these different layers of what you want to do with an NFT. I don't know. I'm starting to think maybe is L1 the solution, but at the same time, like, I think you guys made a good point. What's the difference between an open policy? For me, it's just the process of how you update the metadata in this case, right? I mean, for me, I'd always personally prefer the open policy. It's what we learned, right? It's what we were brought up on. So it serves the same purpose for me to an extent. That's really all the feedback I have right now. I want to dive more into it, obviously.
Yeah, with regards to using the L1 wrong in a way, that's not false. That we should probably look at having some kind of a data layer. I've seen a lot of discussions about this by Sebastian Guillemot from DC Sparks, and different people talking in SIPs and in different in Twitter. Absolutely, having a settlement layer that would store data in a safe way, other than the L1, would be interesting. And quick comment, SIP 68 is definitely not in the right direction, because that's not helping this at all. You're adding a lot of datum floating around on the chain, and it's the same thing, right? It's also an L1. It's also clogging, and it's asking a lot of processing power from smart contracts operation on all the stake pools. Everybody, literally every stake pool in the world runs the same smart contract execution to confirm a transaction, right? So you're asking a lot of people to verify your little metadata update. Well, metadata updates also, but they're not verified. There's no smart contract rolling. It's just like, so yeah, there's a question there. If you minted the way I said, with minting empty tokens and then setting all the common fields with a single TX, you're saving literally 10,000 times this amount of data, at least on chain. So I mean, if you're reducing the amount of clutter by 100x or a bit more, that's still cool, right? That's a step in the right direction. Uncluttering the L1 is good. And also, no, I think, yeah, that's just steps in the right direction. But that's kind of how you build those things, though, Cash. It's you do small adjustments and or major changes, but major changes will be stuff like, I mean, Hydra and stuff like that will help a bit in the sense that you resolve a lot of operations on a layer 2, and on the layer 1 you resolve only the net effect. So you can have hundreds of transactions, micro transactions going on very quickly, and then in the end I lost 50 and you gain 50. Well, on the L1 there's just a single transaction that goes $50 to cash, right? So that those kind of things with a lot of, it's literally a Hydra, right? A dragon, multiple heads, where that'll be one of the really beautiful things. I think a lot of people, I said what it could do the first thing when it came out, and I said something and somebody said, no, well, you know, and he shut me down, and it turns out I was right. There's patterns and ways that we hadn't figured out at the beginning of Hydra, but that are now being figured out. It's a hard paradigm, but it's extremely powerful, and you can do quick auctions, you can do poker games, you can do a lot of things in ways that will be extremely quick and will be resolved on the L1 with a lot less clutter. Like the power that you get out of this is really huge. It's really a multiplier effect. So hopefully by the time we get to the looming threat of mass adoption, there's going to be a few multipliers like sidechain integration that's getting much better, even cross-chain integration that's getting much better. There's people working on that are doing great things, like bridges that are actually safe, and Hydra and other kind of multipliers on Cardano. I think if we put all of that together, we keep building good fundamental innovations like that. I'm not talking about my SIP. My SIP is a tiny thing. It's a tiny thing. It's interesting. It serves a single purpose correctly, which is what I guess people should be expected to try to contribute. It's not always possible to do a paradigm change on a chain as big as Cardano, but if everybody contributes little things, then it can be good. And a lot of projects came to me and said, hey, cool, I was kind of looking for a solution for that. I hashed out my own. I like yours better, or like, if yours is standard, then I'd rather go with the standard, or they saw that and they're like, yeah, okay, cool. I'm probably just gonna use your stuff, and that's gonna help me and go easier. So I think in a weird way, I'm also glad I can provide for all those OG projects that maybe didn't know how to deliver, or knew how but didn't have a good standard. Like it, hopefully it's enabling for all those projects to actually deliver on what they promised. If whether or not they overpromised at the time of their mint, it would be good for them to be able to deliver whatever they said they would do. So so in that sense, hopefully that's an enabling SIP for Cardano.
And I mean, I personally, didn't mean to cut anybody off, but I personally think you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, we're at a time where this ecosystem has matured enough And there's enough people here with good enough ideas and willing to contribute that, you know, maybe it is time to reevaluate this thing on the base layer and do it once and do it right? And get the opinion from everybody in the space who's using this every day, right? Like you said, a lot of these gaming projects or projects in general, right? Because updating metadata is a very common thing and it goes well across gaming, right? You know, something like that, maybe it was an oversight, but maybe we can make, you know, new improvements for the L2 with our L1 planning, right? I don't know, like the Sebastian point you made, my wheels started turning yesterday when I was hearing him talking with Charles, right? And it does make sense, right? I didn't think it would, but in a lot of ways, it makes a lot of sense to me that we need to be efficient on L1 and use L2 for our little things, right? Changing games, changing, you know, real estate deeds, whatever, you know, the medical documents, all these things that people are saying is the future of the chain with the utility, right? I think that we should focus as a group on not like, why is there CIP 68 and why is there CIP 86? If there's enough overlap between the two of them, why are we not just making one CIP, right? And what, like, I don't know, man. There's so many things around the process. It's not so much the technology side of it. It's the process side of it that I don't agree with or understand, right? Like, what world do you not go to Walmart and ask them, you know, about shipping procedures, you know, when you're changing your shipping procedure, like it for Walmart, like it just doesn't make sense, right? Like you should ask the space what they think, and then you can have a combination of all these great brains. I thought that was the whole point of Cardano anyways, right? Like that's my point.
Well, I think we're seeing it. I think we're seeing it more and more. And I think you wouldn't want to be involved in Cardano dev 8 years ago when it was starting and they were making articles and you had to be a fucking math and programming genius and know Haskell and know the fundamentals of logical proofs of all the Ouroboros paper, right? So it's also a question. It's like being involved in the creation of the internet, whereas being involved in I made a web page for my friend. That's not the same level at all, right? So I think Cardano was the foundation is built, and now we're adding stories to this edifice. That's really great. I keep saying it's like the Colosseum, right? And when you got only the foundation, it looks awesome, but you can do not a lot with it, right? Because it's only the foundation. But the more layers you got to it, the more spectacles you can, the more shows you can actually book inside, and the more crowd that will come. But as much as you wouldn't want to be involved in the creation of the foundation, like I said, because it's specialized and it's super harsh and rarefied, now we're getting to utility, and people are using this thing, right? There's more and more real world use cases. And what you're saying is, well, now that we have companies using the real world cases, the people that built the layer below it should ask, is our shit working? Can you actually use this correctly up there for your product, right? And go like, oh, well, you can't. Oh, okay, what did I do wrong? Okay, well, metadata should be available in smart contracts. That would have been cool and stuff like that, right? You know, so a lot of little things that you go like, well, when I actually use your stuff, I would have liked the brake pedal on your car. So it's usually like this in R&D. That I've seen in all fields. You create something at the academia level, and then people in the commercial level go like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, let's make this way more simpler. And then they take your base principles and they kind of make something hacky with it. And then the consumer goes like, how do I even use your shit? And so there's levels to all of these things. All the layers are important, but the feedback loop from either the users or like us, the product owners in a way on Cardano, I think will become more and more relevant. And I think we're becoming good. We're learning the technology enough that even the users like Ucash or T-Query, like more dev side, the people that play like me more with the innards of transactions and smart contracts, our feedback is going to be more and more relevant. I think should go back down the layers and provoke some shifts. But I think people like Sebastian Guillemot and is fighting the good fight in a way, is really more in a position to argue and fight. He's been involved in the beginning and in the lower layers of Cardano and can really help, but also has a lot of products running on top of this chain, like wallets and a lot of products and Milkom Media, and is driving innovation in the proper way also. So takes all kinds, I would say, but I would say that we're seeing a lot more of us and the users and the product owners of Cardano getting their ideas heard. I think you're just fighting the good fight, Cash. You're saying there should be even more. I agree. I think it's coming. I think it's getting better.
Yeah,
If
I
I
don't
can-
think I'm going to be able to provide you ledger level feedback, but I can tell you the impacts that it's going to have on the community, on
Yep.
our businesses, right? Our marketplaces, you know, those types of things. I'm just trying to be a voice of reason. I don't think that there's any world that a SIP should exist just because of popularity. Like, to me, that is a big problem.
Yep.
It's very tribal right now, it feels like, in a lot of cases, which I really don't like. You know, you made a lot of great points, but that's my main point, right? Like, are we entering the era of multiple ways to do things on Cardano? Maybe that's the case, right? I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that my voice is heard. That's all.
You're right.
That was
I
gonna
think
be,
I think what
if I
needs to
can chime
happen.
in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think you actually nailed it. I think, Cash, with the last statement. It was what I was gonna actually come back with is, for example, when you mentioned the two SIPs and whether they should, for example, be merged or whether they should be, one should be picked over the other. I don't really think of it as that way. We've always not been framing it as that or the other. I do think genuinely that with the layer one, first of all, originally just being used for ADA transactions, and then eventually having the metadata, and then people coming up with the, I'd say, Alessandro and coming up with the SIP25 standard, which sparked the whole NFT, Cardano NFT, let's say, space with that standard. And then eventually us figuring out the limitations and the obstacles that some might have. I see that we, personally, my view is that these are all functions of actual requirements. When Alice came up with 668, it was based on a requirement when he wanted to allow basically redemption or swapping and having smart contract based, let's say, changes to be done with data being read. That is a requirement. We, for example, in Equine had a different requirement, and I think both projects in both directions had a requirement that is not super specific and that can provide value to different use cases. In our derivation, we kind of did zoom out and generalize and abstract the concept in a way to think of, well, what can everyone gain from this function? And that's why it's being proposed. And on the part of congestion and game data congesting the blockchain, I think similar to NFTs, the onus is always on the project and the project creator to efficiently or to be responsible for how they use the layer one. So if somebody is, whether it's a game project or an NFT project, I think they need to be mindful of how they do that. So for example, in NFT's case, we're not going to be, for example, arbitrarily updating things like changing your skin that's selected. That doesn't need to be on the blockchain per se every single time you switch it, right? Or changing your profile picture or stuff like that. But if you gonna go to the things that need the blockchain, for example, entering a race, that's gonna need a horse to be submitted in. And then when the results are out, that's also gonna be a transaction, and that's gonna be efficient in a way where that transaction will send people their horses. That will also at the same time, whether it's the same transaction or doesn't fit in one, but in general, that batch will be event-based. So there are levels of limiting that congestion, and that is our responsibility as projects in every project, really. But again, it's a decentralized world. We can't really tell everyone exactly how to use it, but the technology is meant to limit that. I think Cardano does a good job with the minimum carry to at least reduce spam and congestions. I guess NFTs kind of prove that might not be enough. with the congestion that was created. I think it's the same. There's no new burden that is being added by this being there. It's actually probably reducing by making more efficient solutions. I think, again, my non-dev thought about this, but just want to chime in.
And that was actually, that's an interesting point you made at the end. Fence, I don't know if you've already said this or not, but what about existing collections, right? Like you did say that you had something built in for people who had made mistakes, you know, with their planning of their policy IDs and stuff like that. Is there a fix for that in here?
Yeah, they can still have a way to define their oracle and then use the oracle to provide metadata updates. The solution is to use the same pub key hash as the policy for minting. Whether or not it's locked, if you can send a message using the same pub key hash to yourself, you can provide metadata updates in those transactions. It's the default oracle key, basically, is the pub key hash of the minting policy. So as long as you didn't throw away your private key for minting, which you really shouldn't have, and then you can still update your, maybe you thought it's locked now, but you know, don't do that. Keep your keys somewhere.
I think there's also a key distinction here when we talk about the update mechanism, is that there is minting and then there's updates. So if somebody really, for example, believes that the minted state is the original pristine condition, well, that is on the blockchain, that is not being deleted in any way. So it is there. And if somebody, for example, instead of showing the indexer state, wants to show the original minted state, that is not really being replaced the same way it is now being replaced, for example, when somebody mints the duplicate and burns using the conventional method. But even then, that still exists if somebody goes to an explorer and sees the original mint, right?
But you know, let's say you had fun plastics or keys that were locked, and you wanted to update them suddenly, you could.
Gotcha. No,
That's
I mean, even
hypothetically.
hypothetically, if I were to own a collection called Fun Plastic, sure.
Yes, and you had the private keys, then you could.
Got it. No, it's good to know because, you know, as a minting provider, right, that's something that we never, it's never really communicated, right? Like, make sure you hold on to this, even though your policy's locked. So, you know, just even having that come out of this is good for me. Like, just another reminder for the community. That's what we've built everything around, right? Is like trying to help people not make the same mistakes over and over again. So this is a great way to add to that, right?
Well, it was kind of, we had to define a way to have a default key, and there's actually no way to make that safe if it's not the pub key hash of your policy. So if you did throw away your keys and you're locked out of our CIP because of that, I'm sorry, but there's actually no smart, secure way of defining that any other way. So it's kind of yeah, it's but you know, if you minted with me, I have your keys secured. If you, I'm sure you guys also keep the keys in a secure location for your minting projects. So hopefully Fencemaker also does in your user profile somewhere in their database. I don't know how that works. Hopefully most of the minting services have kept the keys somewhere safe. So but yeah, I don't like, it's not meant as a surprise. It's just that it's literally the only way for a locked policy that I saw. I mean, maybe David has an idea right now. It's like, no, that there's 18 other ways, but that I could think of. Only the pub key hashes that are defined in the policy script make sense.
No, we're gonna write our own CIP. Don't worry about it, man. No, I'm just kidding.
That's why I sent it to tQuery before, so that if he had like the, well, mate, we're already working on the same thing, maybe we could merge them together. I was expecting, I sent it to all the devs I knew, so that if anybody had a major objection, they should stand up right at the beginning and tell me, Nick, like, I'm already doing this, like there's 18, like there's all these things that I've made, and so we could merge it together. I would have merged with anybody that stood up and had the same kind of thing they were doing. So hopefully nobody was shy, and nobody that should have objected didn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's yeah, It's a big problem, right? Like that people need to actually give feedback. I'm really guilty of that. I made that whole long post and I never even wrote a comment on the SIP. So, I throwing rocks from a glass house a little bit, but at the same time, like there should be a very easy to access forum, maybe not something that's just a GitHub page like that we can all give our feedback on, or even then, like imagine an email reminder, like something that simple, like, hey, there's a new SIP. It's in this stage. Here's a chance to give feedback. Like we know you run a business on Cardano that utilizes only NFTs, Same thing with JPEG Store, NMaker, anybody really, even the smallest single consumer should want to be informed.
That would be like yes and no. Like you don't want to be reading all the SIP proposals. Like there's no way. No, you wouldn't understand all of them. There's a lot of them you don't give a shit. Like you can go. I agree that GitHub is the wrong place to do this now, because a lot of people that would want maybe to read the SIPs don't know GitHub, are not devs, don't understand any of it, and now they need to make an account, they need to go in the SIP, they need to find the pull requests, know what that even is, and find the changes, find the file, read it. It's a lot of it's convoluted, I would agree, when you're not absolutely fluent in GitHub. But
Well, that's one of the reasons why we're trying to host these presentations and have these meetings with every party involved, devs and non-devs, to facilitate this process. We had Thomas Velkup, who's actually the author of SIP 67 and 68. He then contacted Alessandro, but I think he wrote it before he did. And we had him on in August, and he gave a presentation similar to yours. And unfortunately, probably not a lot of people, enough people have seen that, but hopefully that'll change in the future. That's why I wanted to also have you on to explain in perhaps more non-technical terms.
I know I was allowed to comment on SIP 68 way before it came out, because Alessandro just posted it on Twitter, and I also posted my SIP on Twitter so that anybody could give me any kind of feedback on it. Maybe it's because of GitHub, but nobody cares, right? No, they look and they're like, that looks like code, fuck. Like they just go away. So not even if I put that in a forum cache, even if I put that on Reddit, nobody would have read it, pun intended. But I don't know if people would read SIPs anyway, right? What we need is a really good YouTuber that reviews every SIP that comes out in a way that's sexy and funny and short, and for a 5-year-old and in 1 minute, and then for a 15-year-old and in 5 more minutes, and then for a technical person in 30 minutes or something, does a video that you can just like, chapter 1, now you can opt out, please leave if you don't care, chapter 2. And we could have a personality like that just reads the SIPs and gives us an idea, but then
content idea for Charles.
It needs to have a feedback loop that ties back into the people that actually take the decisions for SIPs, and that won't easily happen. There's a Discord for the people that take the decision for SIPs, right? And you can be in there, but you're not in the meeting. I don't know if I could just join the meetings for the SIPs. I don't know. I didn't try. I was not like, hey.
I think you could. The meeting is in the Discord server itself. They have it bi-weekly, and I think you could.
I could just join. That'd be funny.
I was in the server a couple of days ago, and they said that they're very short on, and they need more technical people who actually understand what are the SIPs about and what's being proposed. So they're on the lookout for new SIP editors. And you can definitely join. I can even post a link to an invite to their Discord server, but in the comments here.
I think in general, I think this is also a good maybe a reminder, or just a good, let's say, a ramp up or on for people who are in the Cardano ecosystem in general to be maybe more, let's say, connected to the open source nature of a lot of this development. I think it's great that we all get this exposure. I think it's super cool that this component, I was never so close to the SIPs until I actually had a project that was developing one, but I at least would look at the relevant ones when I got really deep. For example, SIP 25 specifically was the one that mattered to me, just because I was an NFT collector, and I think it's just the whole open source nature and of this. If you're developing on Cardano, and if there's that channel there for open source development, I think it's just super relevant to at least have a clue what's going on. Maybe not every single time for every single one, but just keep an eye. I think it's part of the business, but it's just really good for everyone who's interested in the technology to keep an eye on what's new and upcoming.
Yeah, you can just stand in the editor meetings. I just
And-
joined. I was alone, but you can just click on there and be in the channel. So,
I
yes.
mean, as much of a joke I know you were making it, you know, it's really not a terrible idea, Fence. Like the whole premise behind what I'm trying to say is that you need to, like, it's like, I don't know if it's different in other countries, but in the US, right? If your neighbor wants to do something in their house or whatever, they post a big sign in the front yard, right? Like, here's the court date. You can come here. You can make your point heard. Boom, right? I just don't feel like it's matured to that point yet. The process behind what creates a SIP, and that's all, right? Like SIP 68, SIP 86. I'm sure that there's going to be more, right? Like I said, we might be entering the era of multiple, right, standards, which is fine. But you know, having a way to like vote, having a way to eat. I might not know the ledger level, right? But having a feedback section on how this could impact businesses, right? How this could impact consumers. Maybe add that as a section to the SIP. Like you said, use your code language, talk all smart, but then give the regular people who are working in this ecosystem a chance at an overview, a summary. What's the purpose of the SIP? Because I had to ask Twitter, right? Like, could I have wrote that comment on the SIP? Sure, but it wouldn't have gotten nearly the feedback it did. It wouldn't have got the recognition it did. It's 16,000 people saw my post. How many
Right.
people have looked at that SIP? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Double digits.
I'm not trying to gloat or anything, but I mean, it's really that easy, right? To get
But,
people
but
involved.
that's the power of social media. GitHub is not a social media. You're right. And I was not saying the SIP was all technical, because there's a huge section called motivation that's just explaining why you're doing it. And the why is probably the section that's the most pertinent and the easiest to actually read. And that could be publicized way more. But I was not kidding about an influencer at all. I was very serious. I think bite-sized videos explaining each SIP or even each SIP proposal is a really much better way of reaching everybody and giving them a digestible format than any way you could publicize this SIP on GitHub or on Reddit or on any way that's text-based for a lot of reasons. And these kind of calls, like these kind of calls, if they have the outreach that they need, and they reach a lot of people, like I'm sure we're all gonna retweet this one, but hopefully we're discussing a lot of things here, not just SIP 86, which is great, but hopefully we could clip maybe just my explanation, my 5-minute explanation of the SIP, and put that somewhere, and be a SIP 86 in a nutshell, right? The 5-minute version, because you don't want to look
on the SIP.
Like, yeah, because maybe they don't care about this hour discussion about philosophy of Cardano, but having somewhere a bite-sized version of like elevator pitch of every SIP would be good. But I'm used to doing elevator pitches. Not everybody is, but having good communicators, I'm not meaning me, just having a good communicator do the elevator pitch for every SIP, I think would be most valuable. And somebody that does either interviews or kind of like the format we're doing here, except we're really making this longer. then I would expect that if it was just a little capsule just talking about one thing. But no,
Are
that's
we almost
interesting.
wrapped?
You're right. I think you're kind of pissed that CIP 68 went by too quickly and you didn't get to say anything on it. I feel you, and like you said, you mentioned that maybe that's true, and that's kind of one of the problems I've mentioned about Alessandro, is that people take his word for gospel a bit too quickly, and I think even he doesn't take himself that seriously. I think he's prototyping. I think he's really glad to show new things that Cardano can do and say, like, look, I made this do this. It's really cool. Did you think of this? No? Cool. Right. New idea. But he's not setting the standard. He's not saying, he's provoking the standard. He's provoking people to say, oh, wow, we can do this now. Maybe we should put a standard around that so that we can all not fuck it up. And think about this deeply and measure the consequences and do this correctly. But people take it as a golden standard the moment it comes out of his mouth. And sometimes that's not science. That's not peer review. That's go fast and break things. That's not the Cardano way. And in that sense, this is a problem. And it's not a problem because of Alice. It's a problem because of how people react to everything he does. He's extremely thought-provoking. He's really smart. He's good at doing this. He's good at prototyping stuff that he's hitting a target note that nobody saw, right? Which is one of the definitions of genius, right? But that doesn't mean it's the end. It's like, oh, now there's a target over there. What can we do with that? And people should, a lot of people should focus on his thought-provoking idea and settle it into a solid foundation, like the rest of Cardano is built like. And it should not happen that through like you said, a bit of a cult of personality, things go too quickly.
Yeah,
right.
You hit the nail on the head.
Is that a good summary?
Yeah, it was. It was.
Is that what you meant?
My only last piece of feedback is don't put your project name in the CIP. That's it.
Right. But what if it's a catalyst? No, let's not go there. Okay.
Yeah, regarding that,
Let's not go there. We don't have another hour and a half. All right.
No,
Let's
no.
not talk about
I
catalyst.
wasn't about
Yes.
to ask about the project, but in the CIP, you mentioned an open source indexer. This is a question from Santis. He couldn't be here with us today. He's usually in our calls. He's a member of the guild and the dev. And he asked, will this indexer provide the free decentralized API, or are you foreseeing paid service for the Oracle?
It's open source, so I'm giving the code away. And you said indexer, not Oracle. The Oracle will be code to help you build transactions, but that will be in your app, right? It'll be an add-on in your app to emit little messages, little transactions that follow the Oracle protocol, so that your transactions get picked up by your indexer. The indexer is a build upon Ura, which is a little application on Cardano that reads all the blocks as they come in and make a database with it. And we'll have set it up in a way that reads messages from this Oracle that you can just config to your policy or your Oracle, and it will keep a database for you. Then it's still up to you to we'll provide code to build an API on top of this, but we're not putting it on Amazon for you. I mean, or Google or whatever. You should set up your own server at some point. Like, we're not going to run your app, but we're giving you the whole code so that you could do it. Right? It's open source. I'm not giving you a cloud service. It's not software as a service. I'm not selling you anything. We're giving away the code with that will work, and it will be the version that we're running for Ecoin. But you'll have a way that you can just configure for your project. It was the most gain I could get out of doing it for Ecoin anyway, but still kind of providing for other people. So I asked for it to be more general with a config for Ecoin, so that you guys could just switch the config and look at the config of Ecoin to kind of know what you could do with it. Hopefully that answers his question. I'm not going to run your Amazon for you.
I don't think he expected that, but and
I'm not
another question.
Yeah.
wanted to add something to that?
No.
Or
No, no.
so another question that he sent us is that there is a way to update the Oracle address.
Right.
What is the reason? What are the typical reasons for updating this address?
I kind of said it, so you must have walked in a bit later, but it's in case your address, you're going to have a hardware storage that can emit a change to this address. But this address, you need to have the private key to sign for it. And that will be in your bot or in your server or in your cloud. If that ever gets compromised or you lose it, then you lose the possibility of updating the game. But since you still have your hardware storage key, you can update and say, well, now we're going to use this key instead that I just regenerated. And you can make a new key. So your hardware storage, if you lose it, you're in trouble, but that's always the case. But your software key that's going to be pushed out on the internet, which is not a super cool practice, you have a way to make it invalid and update it to a different key. And you're the only one that can do that. So it's in case you're a human and you either lose your key, delete it by accident, or get it compromised in some way. Send it to a friend by email. Right? Was I muted?
No, you weren't muted.
there's literally no facial expression across the board. It's funny. Any other questions? I like that, Cash. Fake
David,
surprise.
I think you had your hand up at one point. Were you just waving, or did you want to ask a question?
No, I was just reacting to Fence.
I think it was a thumbs up, not a hand up.
Yeah.
No, earlier,
Earlier.
before the thumbs up. Yeah.
Just saying hi.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Thanks, Fence, for the great.
Oh, you're
presentation.
welcome. Anybody has any question, my DM is always open. No, just ask. And Cash, when you're worried about SIPs, just ask me or David.
I did. That's the problem. I asked David and he wasn't happy with either of them. No, I'm just kidding. Nah, man. Appreciate you.
All right.
Thanks
Cool.
everyone for joining. And if there aren't any more questions, I think we can wrap up the meeting. It's been a bit over an hour. Let's not give the audience too, too much content that they can dismiss. So,
all right. Have a good one.
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you, guys.
Take it easy.